Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 1990's Represent. We're still in our fifth cycle in 1992. In this episode, we're talking about a movie, and that movie this episode is Batman Returns. Saw this back when it came out and enjoyed it, thought it was pretty cool. Eventually, over time, though, I started to like the movie just a little bit less. So I remember seeing it in 1992 in the theaters and really enjoying it, having a good time with it. And then I think it was like on HBO. I don't remember if HBO got stuff before it was available to rent. I think it did come out to HBO first. So I remember seeing it on HBO and thinking was a little bit more bored of it the second time. And then I think I maybe watched it one more time on maybe like on like VHS or something after seeing it on HBO. And then a few years ago, it was playing at like it was like during Christmas because I think the Batman Returns is set kind of around the Christmas time period, and enjoyed it. Had fun with it. Had more fun with it when I saw it in the theater again than I did on my rewatches on HBO. And then most recently rewatched it again on HBO Max. I had fun with it, but I do feel that some of the like the first 20 minutes of the movie or so to me are still kind of boring. There's a lot going on in the movie, and I don't like it as much as the 1989 Batman. I like it more than the two Schumacher ones. I don't really know how I would compare it to the Christopher Nolan films. It's one cool thing with the Batman films is you have your two Tim Burton movies, which I think try to kind of straddle the line of being somewhat realistic as well, but then also very silly and very comic booky. And then the Schumacher ones, I think, lean more into the comic book, like campiness and silliness, almost akin to the 1966 Batman, I think, in a weird way. And then, of course, the Nolan films and the Batman from Matt Reeves being kind of the more of the realistic, very gritty kind of Batmans. So I definitely feel the Tim Burton ones kind of try to occupy both those realms at the same time, kind of. And I think they generally do a pretty good job of it. Some of the stuff in this one was a little more in the realm of like silliness, like the circus gang and like the way they portrayed the Penguin. Even though I think Danny DeVito is amazing in this film, but one of his best roles. This is not the kind of style of Penguin that I prefer. I kind of prefer the kind of crime lord, um, like operates a generally like legitimate business that it sometimes ends up helping Batman out in exchange for like leniency on um, not like putting to rest or putting to bed all his like criminal stuff, like the portrayal in the Batman by Colin Farrell. I thought was very good. So I feel that's kind of my style of Penguin, or like the Penguin in the. I think he first showed up in the Arkham games in Arkham City. So kind of that version of Penguin is the one I prefer, even though I think Danny DeVito does an amazing job in this, and definitely is like chewing the scenery and is way over the top. So he's definitely one of the better things in the film. I definitely think I like the 1989 one a little bit more. That said, we have some notes here. We're going to get through that, and then we'll get to the plot and all that kind of stuff as well. Let's see where we are here. So we have Batman Returns, first released June 19th, 1992. Like I said, saw this back when it came out. It was a just like huge deal. I remember, I think it was like I first learned of this being a thing. It's sometime in early 1992. I remember seeing. I think they were showing the 1989 film on TV or something, and they were using that like broadcast of the original Tim Burton film to basically hype up Batman Returns. And this was maybe like in like the like early spring of 1992 is when I remember like seeing it, and I was like, Batman Returns, what is that? And then realizing it was like a whole new Batman film that was coming out. So saw it back then, enjoyed it, like I said, but liked it a little bit less subsequently. Tim Burton apparently originally was not interested in returning. He, I think, is kind of opposed to generally doing sequels, unless it like offers something completely new and different. And basically, the way they enticed him back in was they gave him more creative control. I don't know if it was entire creative control. It may have just been total creative control over the film. But so basically, he came back to get creative control. That's why I feel we're reading somewhere that I think he initially in the I don't know if this is that like accurate or anything like that, but in the original film, apparently he wanted like a circus gang, and I think Warner Brothers was kind of against it. So that's why I feel like the circus gang, or some people have speculated that the circus gang in this movie is a very prevalent force in the film. Basically, its whole Penguin's whole gang is called like the Red Triangle gang, and they're all like former like circus performers that are like doing crime kind of thing. Um, the Red Triangle gang to me in this movie feels kind of out of place. Like it feels definitely feels something that's more adjacent to the Joker, not necessarily Penguin. So maybe that was just like if Tim Burton got creative control, he's like, cool, I'm gonna use the thing that I wanted to use last time, and I feel the like Penguin's gang doesn't necessarily really fit all that well here. They try to make it make sense by having him be like the aquatic like aquatic bird boy or whatever it was, because Batman's like reading like newspaper articles about it at one point in the movie. So they try to make it make sense, but I feel that the Red Triangle gang just feels a little bit out of place, at least with the Penguin. Just my opinion on it. But um, this movie ended up grossing 266 million, and the budget on it was estimated to be between 50 and 80 million. However, it grossed much less than the original. The 1989 one grossed like 411 million. Um, and just that movie was just huge. And I remember the theater that I saw the original in, and also this one, they had some movie posters up after they mostly would often take them down, but they always had a couple that were still up, and they were like something like their most successful films for that particular theater. This is just like a local like independent theater, and the 1989 poster, like up until the time they moved the theater to they basically like moved it to a different part of town or the town that it was in, and then they expanded it to be like a 6 screen theater. Initially, it was 2 screens, and then they added in 2 more smaller screens, and then they eventually just moved the entire theater. But they had a Batman poster from 1989 that said that was their most like the movie that theater made the most money on was the 1989 Batman, at least up until the time that the theater moved. I don't know what their best movie now is. You have to like would have to like adjust for inflation and all that kind of stuff. But the 1989 one at that theater at the time was their most successful, which I thought was an interesting little thing, especially when you go back and look at this, like how much more it grossed than than Batman Returns. I think this one kind of got a little bit mixed critically. Like the reviews were, they all really praised the primary actors. You know, Michael Keaton, Danny DeVito, and Michelle Pfeiffer, but they kind of like thought the plot wasn't great. I kind of agree with that. I think the performances from the 3 leads are really good. Christopher Walken's also really good in this movie as well. Kind of playing like he plays Max Schreck, who we'll get to it a little bit later in our notes here, but he does like Christopher Walken's really good in this as well. Some like there's been a lot of talk like recently. I think like this general audiences have had a really big turnaround on this movie where I think like they're thinking it's maybe not thinking, but it's getting more praise than it did back when it came out. A lot of it's showing up like a lot of people think it's better than the 1989 film. I kind of disagree with that a little bit, but it's definitely better than the two Schumachers. But it's gotten kind of like I don't want to say a cult following because it made a lot of money, but a lot of people are now really kind of just praising this movie. Especially like the acting. Like I said, Danny DeVito, Michelle Pfeiffer, Michael Keaton, all really good in this movie. And it like I remember seeing one Reddit comment that made a lot of sense to me after kind of like this feels like less of a Batman movie and more of just a Tim Burton movie. Like a lot of the stuff in there is definitely just stuff that Tim Burton just like I think like threw in because it was like kind of like in his style. It doesn't necessarily always work with Batman. Like some of the plot points are just really weird, and like the Penguin scheme is actually like a lot more twisted than like you might realize at first when he's just like looking through like the birth records, and it's ended up he wants to kidnap all of the firstborns of like Gotham's like wealthy people and just like get rid of them. That's pretty twisted even for like the Penguins. So that's probably like more like a Tim Burton thing. But yeah, like a lot of people have had a huge turnaround on this movie. And like I said, I like it, but I definitely like it less than some of the other Batman films. What else do we have here? Apparently, Warner Brothers wanted they wanted Danny DeVito, I think, initially for the Penguin, but they also wanted Robin Williams in this film to play Riddler, which they didn't do. That would eventually go to Jim Carrey in the film after this. Robin Williams as the Riddler, though, would be really interesting. That's something I would definitely like. If there was a way to get like obviously we could never do this, but like imagine like what the Indiana Jones movies would have been like with Tom Selleck because he was initially supposed to play Indiana Jones or was in heavy consideration for it. Imagine just seeing what Robin Williams could have done with the Riddler. That would be really interesting. But apparently they wanted them, couldn't get them. The original scripts initially did not interest Tim Burton really at all. So I think like they wanted to get this movie started earlier than they did, but the initial scripts didn't interest him, and he went on to then do Edward Scissorhands, and then I think he also started doing writing for The Nightmare Before Christmas. Before I think then in like January of 1991 is when they actually got him back on to do this film. So Max Schreck is actually a completely new character for the film. I don't know if they've ever done any comics with him after this that weren't adaptations of this movie. Like if they took that character out of the movie and then just kind of brought him into the bigger Batman universe, kind of like the way like they did with Harley Quinn, where Harley Quinn was initially a character created for the animated series, and then eventually the character was so popular that they started working her into other stories and kind of like a character that was created from something unrelated to the comics that was then introduced into the comics later. So I wonder if they ever did Max Schreck in the comics. They may have. I'll have to check that out. Apparently, Sean Young was in heavy consideration for Catwoman. I remember like there was like some homemade audition tape she made, I think, where she kind of created her own like Catwoman costume, and I think like eventually after she didn't get the part, she sent the tape to like one of the Entertainment Tonight or something. I think it's like I'll try to find a video and we'll try to link that below if that is around. A lot of people were in consideration for Catwoman, though. I think Annette Bening was actually cast like, initially, and then had to kind of drop out when she got pregnant. But also other people that were interested were Bridget Fonda, Madonna. Apparently Julie Newmar was interested, so that would have been interesting because like from a throwback to the 1960s TV show. Jennifer Jason Leigh, bunch of other people that were just interested in playing Catwoman. So some of those would have been interesting takes. But now we're going to get into the plot for Batman Returns. So basically, starts out you have just two rich like socialites have their kid who ends up being the Penguin, ends up being Oswald Cobblepot. You don't see, I don't think you see him as a baby, but you just hear like you see like a nurse like run out of like the room in their mansion where he's delivered. Another person walks out, and then like you hear people screaming, and then eventually they're pushing the little like baby carriage through the park, and they take it to a bridge and just drop it into a river. And then like some 30 some odd years later like go by, and the Penguin apparently has been living or part of the like was probably part of the circus at some point, and they're now like using like the Gotham Zoo as their like the abandoned Gotham Zoo as their like base of operations. And he kind of leads the Red Triangle gang. They're like doing like a lighting of the Christmas tree, and the Red Triangle gang. Well, initially before that, like you have Max Schreck talking about the power plant he wants to build, and talking to a bunch of other executives. And Selena Kyle is his secretary. Obviously, becomes Catwoman, played by Michelle Pfeiffer. I remember there being controversy surrounding Michelle Pfeiffer in this movie. Like I think initial like some of the reason it didn't. I was reading in my research. Some of the reason it didn't make as much money as the original was this one is, even though I like it less, it's darker in tone. Like just look at some of Penguin's kind of motivations, and then I think a lot of parents were just worried that Michelle Pfeiffer was criticized as being like too sexy for the movie, and I can kind of see parents being kind of like a little worried about that because I think like it's not enough to get an R rating, but it's kind of on almost like the edge of what PG-13 like probably like what you could do in a PG-13 movie. Anyhow, so they back to the plot. They are discussing this power plant that Max Shrek wants to build, and then they go to everybody goes to the kind of laying in the tree. Selena's there like cleaning up the office, um, getting some like stuff ready, and then they light the Christmas tree, and the Red Triangle Gang attacks. I think they're initially trying to get, I think his name is Chip. Chip is Max Shrek's son, but they end up kidnapping Max Shrek instead. And this is when he meets the Penguin, and the Penguin is like, "Hey, we know how corrupt you are. We have a bunch of this toxic waste from one of your factories." And Max is like, "That could have come from anywhere." And he's like, "Well, what about the information that says you own, like, I think there were like fire traps, a bunch of the fire traps in the city?" And he's like, "Well, I would have shredded those documents." And the Penguin's like, he pulls up like a roll, like a document that's been retaped. He's like a lot of tape and a little patience. You can do some basic information about that. And the other thing I think he had, he's like, it's a hand. He's like, "Hey, I'm the hand of your former like partner." So basically, he's blackmailing Max Shrek into kind of like helping him carry out his plan. And Catwoman eventually, like I think, like she gets attacked at like the attack as well. I think like big Batman saves her or something, but she gets like a taser, like a little like a stun gun kind of thing. She gets home, gets a message from her mom. His mom's like, "Hey, like call me, like do this." And I think like somebody calls and is like, "I'm gonna go on the ski trip by myself." I think that's supposed to be like a maybe like an ex boyfriend of hers or something like that. And then the final message she gets is a message from herself saying, "Hey, like you need to come back to the office because you need to get the power plant proposal files ready for the meeting with Bruce Wayne tomorrow." So she goes all the way back to the office, gets the files ready, and then Max Shrek walks back in. And he's like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" She's like, "I'm getting the files ready for tomorrow. I even opened the protected ones." And he's like, "How do you get into the protected files?" He's like, "Well, I thought it was the name of your dog, and I typed it in, and it was." Um, so kind of like maybe just don't go into the protected files. I don't know, but that's kind of necessary for the plot. So he's like, "Well, like," he's like, "Oh, don't worry, I won't tell anybody about that." And he's like, then she's like, "Well, what are you gonna do? Kill me?" And he's like, stares at her like he's like, "Yeah." And then he's like, "Oh, I got you. I'm just kidding." And then she starts laughing, but he turns and then actually throws her out the window. She goes crashing down through a bunch of like awnings and just lands on the ground. And one of the sillier parts of the movie, like the cats of the area come by, and they start like licking her and like biting her fingers, and then that like, and then she becomes Catwoman that way. That's one of the parts of the film where I'm like, okay, this is just like, this is silly. This is like, I don't know. They've done better. I think Michelle Pfeiffer might be like the best Catwoman overall, but the origin story is kind of on the weird side where like the cats like revived her or whatever. But she goes back to her house, like trashes her house, um, creates the iconic Catwoman costume, and then Max Shrek now wants to get the Penguin into politics. So they create like a whole thing where they want like Oswald to be the mayor. And the way they did that initially was like basically like they tried to kidnap the mayor's son, the Penguin. They staged a rescue, so it makes like the Penguin's a hero. And so like now they want Max Shrek is trying to get the Penguin into office to get rid of the mayor. So again, because the mayor is kind of like an obstacle to this power plant that he wants to build, which actually isn't a power plant. It's more of the way Catwoman described it was it's a capacitor. So it's not really going to generate power. It's just going to suck power up and store it. And that's what basically gets her killed. But they had the meeting with Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne is like, "Hey, like I'm going to fight you on this power plant. I don't think it's a good idea." And then Selena Kyle shows back up. And she's definitely like different. She's definitely like more, I guess, like assertive is the term because she's kind of timid initially. But and Max Shrek is just like, what, like, what's going on? I just like threw, like, he obviously doesn't say, but he's like, I threw out her window. Like, I don't know how she's back. But that happens, and then she starts kind of like dating Bruce Wayne, and then eventually, I think there's like a whole thing where she's like, there's like a whole, the Red Triangle gang is rampaging through the city again, because part of the plan is to basically make the mayor look incompetent, and then also eventually like Batman foils these plots, these plans. And Batman does some sadistic stuff in this movie. There's that scene where he like takes a dynamite thing and like shoves it down a guy's pants, and then just like knocks a guy into a thing. It's like Batman like usually doesn't kill people, but Batman definitely killed a guy there. But they that stuff gets foiled, and then I think Catwoman shows up at whatever building they're using for like the like political part for the Penguin's plan. He's there. He's like, hey, and she's like, hey, we got a problem. We got to deal with Batman. So she makes an alliance with the Penguin to try to essentially blackmail Batman and make him look bad. Look bad. So they kidnap like the Ice Princess, bring her to a rooftop. Batman rescues her, but then the Penguin throws an umbrella that opens up and a bunch of bats fly out, and they knock her, or she panics and falls off the roof. So they basically make it look like Batman like killed this person when Batman didn't. They sabotage the Batmobile to have it be like remote controlled by the Penguin and have it go on a rampage, just destroying stuff. And that's one of the best scenes in the film is like Danny DeVito just chewing the scenery when he's like riding around in this little, almost like the little like toy cars you see at like, or you used to see at like grocery stores. You put a penny in and it's like those little cars. He's like in a miniature Batmobile. He's like, I played this city like a, or played this city like a fiddle. Well, no, not a fiddle. He's like, I played this city like a harp from hell. And then Batman actually like puts it. I guess it's like supposed to be like a CDR or something. It like records it, and then eventually uses that recording to kind of foil, what's the word? Foil the Penguin's plans. But basically, after that, they kind of Batman is kind of like getting. They're trying to frame Batman for a bunch of stuff, and then see what happens after that. So after that, I think there's like another political rally, and this is where Batman plays. They hack the frequency. Alfred hacks it, and they play the CD. Batman scratches the CD like a record at one point. But it basically gets the crowd to turn on the Penguin, and then he's like, "Well, I'm gonna do my actual plan now." And then he retreats back to the zoo where his hideout is. So they do that. They get a bunch of penguins with rockets on their backs and like laser, like sights on their eyes. And then they're like, "Hey," he's like, "Go, and we're gonna destroy Gotham or whatever it is." So they go, and there's like another like a Christmas ball happening at this point as well. And I think this is when Batman and Catwoman actually realize who each other are, because like they're under mistletoe, because it's a throwback to a scene earlier in the film. But he's like mistletoe can be deadly if you eat it, and I think one other person says, well, kiss can be even deadlier if you mean it. And that line gets repeated at the Christmas party, and then I think that's when they realize that Selina realizes that Bruce Wayne is Batman. Batman realizes that she's Catwoman, and this film does a pretty good job, kind of. Playing out the kind of the tension that there is between Batman and Catwoman. I think it's been in the comics for like a long time, but like they did a really good job of kind of illustrating that relationship in the film. But anyhow, after that, the Penguin sends his penguins out to blow up the city. Alfred, they hack the kind of frequency that the penguins are using, and they actually divert them back to the zoo. But Max Shrek gets kidnapped by the Penguin again because he wants to kidnap his son initially. They bring him into the sewer, and the Penguins start just firing rockets on the zoo. They basically destroy the zoo. I think the Penguin gets knocked into like a bunch of water at some point, and then Catwoman is now in the kind of the underground area with Batman and Max Shrek. Batman is like revenge is not good. And he like rips his mask off, and then Max Shrek is like, why is Bruce Wayne dressed like Batman? And she's like, cause he is Batman, you idiot, or something like that. Max Shrek starts shooting at Catwoman, and she's like, she's like, I have 9 lives, so you can just shoot me. It's not going to do anything. He's like, do you have enough bullets to finish the job? But then she like kisses him with the taser, like holds the thing up and like electrocutes him. It's presumed that she's gone as well, but you only see Max's shriveled up, like his like face, kind of like at the end. Penguin shows back up and he's like basically mortally wounded at this point, but he goes into his like thing of umbrellas where he's got all his different kind of like deadly umbrellas, and he pulls one out and it opens up and it's got like it's like the kind that's like a baby's mobile. It's got like little like toys hanging off it. And he's like, I picked the cute one, and then he falls over and the penguins push him into the water, kind of like a burial at sea kind of thing. Um, and that's basically where the movie ends. It fast forwards to like I think like later on, and like Batman is driving through, or Alfred is driving him, I should say, through the city, and he thinks he sees Catwoman, but it's just like a shadow of a cat. And then at the end of the film, you see the bat signal pop up, and then it's Catwoman that's looking up at it. And that's kind of where the film ends. Like I said, I like the movie, but I like it less than the 1989 one. I still think there's a lot of really good stuff in here. The acting specifically is like I think like all the actors involved like understood what kind of film they were making. They knew they were making an over the top Batman movie, especially Danny DeVito. This is like one of his most iconic roles. Even though, like I said, like I prefer the kind of more grounded, realistic version of the Penguin, like the crime boss Penguin. He does a great job in adding his own kind of crazy spin to it. Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman is really good. I think it's the best version of Catwoman we've seen in the films. Anne Hathaway was okay in the Nolan films. Like they didn't really give her a lot to do. And I think it was Zoe Kravitz. I think was in the Batman, and I think she was good in that. I'm hoping that they have her in the whatever the sequel to that movie is, because I think they could do more with that character. But that is going to do it for this episode. We'll be back again in a few days doing another computer or video game. Don't know exactly when that's going to be yet for 1992. And then we'll jump back into 1993 and the rest of the decade. But again, that's going to do it for now. So remember to like, comment, share, subscribe. We'll see you again next time. Thanks again for watching. Take care and have a good one. See ya.